Terry McLaurin, Chris Godwin, and Zay Flowers are all top-tier fantasy options this week. We dig into our wide receiver and tight end rankings on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL, fantasy, and betting for sportingnews.com.
This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. We are going to get into our wide receiver and tight end rankings today, discuss all of the differences we have, discuss the guys that we both like, and just kind of talk through these. We already did this with our running backs and quarterbacks yesterday. So if you missed that episode, go listen to it after this one. But to start up at the top here at our wide receiver rankings, we have a very similar top six, only one difference in it. And it's slightly different order, but Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, AJ Brown, Malik Neighbors, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Easily in our top six. We both agree there. The only difference in our top six is that I have Chris Godwin at 6 and you have Cooper Kupp at 4. Well, I have Cooper Kupp at 11 and you have Chris Godwin at 9. But that's not enough to, like, we both clearly like them a lot. They're still in our top 12. You're playing all of those guys. We also agree that Terry McLaurin's an awesome play this week against Carolina. You have him at 7. I have him at 8. But let's get into a couple guys that we're differing about. I have Drake London at 7, and you have him down a little bit at 19. He's been really, really good the last couple of weeks. He gets a great matchup against the Seahawks. So why are you down on him at 19 this week?
Well, the Seahawks actually do have one good corner. Reek Willett has been hurt, but Devin Witherspoon is out there. So I don't know if you'll see completely shadow coverage on Drake London, but I think this might be a Darnell Mooney, Kyle Pitts game a little bit more, working away and getting some big plays in the middle of the field and downfield. More so against the Seahawks defense. Again, it's not like Witherspoon is just going to totally take him out of the game, and they have moved Drake London around, and he's also a good threat at any point to score a touchdown. So that's part of the reasoning with it. I think we're just happy. Again, we have some guys healthy this week. It's changed a little bit as well, right? When you have Cooper Kupp back in the mix, you also have Malik Neighbors looking good to clear concussion protocol before his game there against the Eagles on Sunday. So a few more guys are also in the mix. So Drake London, again, I have to say he's been a little bit better than we thought, right, overall. But the Falcons' passing game has kind of been in gear, and it's really been nice for everyone. And him, Darnell Mooney, Kyle Pitts, they're all starting to produce. So it's been a little tough for Bijan managers here to wrap their heads around that. But I think London always has a good chance to score. That could be the difference in our rankings this week.
Yeah, I mean, London has scored a touchdown in 4 of the last 5 games. The Seahawks are allowing so many touchdowns to wide receivers over the last few weeks. I mean, Darius Slayton, Deebo Samuel, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, and Wan'Dale Robinson all have scored a touchdown against the Seahawks since week 4, just over the last 3 weeks. And, like, you might say that, the Seahawks have a good corner and Witherspoon, but Darius Slayton was the wide receiver 1 in that game. Malik Neighbors wasn't there. Deebo Samuel goes back and forth between wide receiver 1, Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver 1. So he's not doing all that well covering these guys if he's been on them. So I'm going with Drake London this week. I really like him up in my top 10. And then I also have Diontae Johnson in my top 10 as well as my wide receiver 10 against Washington. You have him a bit down than me, wide receiver 18. Diontae Johnson has been a top 13 wide receiver in 3 of the last 4 weeks since Andy Dalton's taken over. And Washington's been a better defense, but they're still not a top tier, like, shutdown defense at all. So the volume he's getting, 14 targets, 13 targets, 10 targets. He's scoring touchdowns with Andy Dalton. I just got to keep him in my top 12.
Yeah, I just have a weird feeling about this game where the Commanders are going to be too much in control, where I think they'll be able to run the ball. They'll be able to pass to get a lead here with Terry McLaurin from Jaden Daniels, and then they'll probably be able to take over his running game. We'll see about Brian Robinson Jr. I think the report's a little bit more positive, but I still think they can take over on the ground against the Panthers. And what would that mean? The Panthers' offense is less and less on the field. I don't know. This just worries me a little bit. It looks okay on paper, but I think Andy Dalton look, he's been very good when getting the right matchups, wherever home or away. But I'm a little bit nervous that this could go the wrong way. And I think they're also trying to make it a point to get the youngsters involved, Jalen Coker, Xavier Legette. So we'll see. They could just be spreading the targets around a little bit and maybe not on the field as much as we think to get that volume we're looking for.
That's fair. But the volume just seems so
Yeah.
safe. So I don't know. I like Diontae. I like those guys that you just know are gonna get targeted and you feel safe. Especially like as long as Andy Dalton's there, he's gonna hyper target him. So I'm okay with keeping him that high. A couple other guys we agree on. Mike Evans, like we like Chris Godwin this week a lot, but you like Mike Evans even a little bit more than Chris Godwin. You have him ranked back to back at 8 and 9. Again, I had Godwin at 6. I have Mike Evans at 13. Against this Baltimore Ravens defense, they're both great plays this week. But on the opposite side in this game, Zay Flowers is a guy we're really digging in this matchup. He's had nice games back to back. You have him as your wide receiver at 10. I have him at 14, but I might move him up. I mean, he hasn't scored a touchdown in either of the last 2 weeks, but he has put up over 110 receiving yards. He's getting targeted a ton, and this is just a great matchup against the Buccaneers.
Yeah, he's not going to be a big touchdown guy in general. It's just not his nature, right? He's just not a guy that he's going to be looked to. When you have all those tight ends in the red zone and Derrick Henry or Lamar Jackson can run in, you're going to need a long play from Zay Flowers to get in the end zone. So just keep that going. So you have to look for, is he going to get enough targets? Is he going to be effective against this particular secondary? And you say the Buccaneers, yeah. And then you look on the other side. We want some resistance if we want some scoring from Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield. So if we get both teams scoring high, it's going to be great for fantasy and the passing games as well. So they opened it up here. So I do like it that the fact that you'll get Mike Evans, I think, going this week with his size. I mean, he's due for a bigger game. They're actually a little bit better, just a little bit better on the inside than the outside, the Ravens. So that could contain Chris Godwin just a little bit. I still like both of them a lot. I love Zay Flowers. Again, Flowers has now become the safest passing option in the Ravens offense because, again, tight ends can be spread around and then you're not quite sure. You're hoping that Mark Andrew does something, but when you're looking at it, Flowers is the one guy you can count on that Lamar Jackson is going to feed the ball consistently to anywhere on the field.
There are 3 big named guys that were very, very hard to rank
Yeah,
this week.
yeah.
And it's Tyreek Hill. He's been hard to rank since Tua has been gone, but he gets a nice matchup against the Colts. You do have Tyreek Hill ranked as your wide receiver 12. I have him ranked at wide receiver 16. And then the Jets wide receivers now with Garrett Wilson and Davante Adams. Like, how are we going to rank these guys in their first game together in Pittsburgh? Not the easiest of matchups. How much will Adams play in his first game? I don't know. But let's talk through Tyreek Hill first here. Wide receiver 12, do you feel confident in that when you're doing it, or is it just like, it's Tyreek Hill?
Well, I think let's hope that Mike McDaniel used the bye week to
Yeah.
say we need to get Tyreek Hill going somehow, some way with Tyler Huntley. I don't care who the quarterback is; he's your best receiver. Get him involved, even if you have to throw him a pass 2 yards away from the line of scrimmage and get him into the open field. He can do that. He's very quick. He's very good after the catch. So I think they're going to feed him a high volume, and that's going to help. And they have to focus on him a little bit more than Jalen Waddle because Waddle could be stopped in the short area where Hill could take any short pass the distance, right? And that would generate some offense for a team that really needs it. So, and this matchup is good enough as well where you can move Hill around against the Colts and you'll get success. So I'm hopeful that they figured out some things with Hill so he's not totally fading without Tua. So let's just hope that happens this week. And with Wilson and Adams, the surprise here, Michelle, they already had 2 top 20 wide receivers, the Jets. So they have sustained 2. Just one is Alan Lazard, and Alan Lazard is pretty much dead. So if they were able to sustain Lazard and Wilson, by the way, is wide receiver 13 this season, which might surprise some people, right? With the way it's gone a little bit, but you've had some injuries, things in front of him that where he is a borderline wide receiver 1/2. So I think they can sustain both. What I think will happen is you'll see the shift happen where Adams goes up a little bit more because he's the better scoring threat at this point. Wilson has been living on touchdowns. I think Wilson now becomes the guy that has to live on big plays a little bit more. And I would say Adams is going to be the better asset. But I think they're both top 20 borderline wide receivers this week, even in a tough matchup.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they're utilized. And the Steelers secondary can be iffy. I mean, Joey Porter Jr., He's not allowing a ton of yards. He will hold you and probably get some penalties, but that doesn't
Yeah.
help Wilson or Adams if that happens. At least one of these guys are going to come down with a touchdown. If I had to start one, I'm still just going to go with Garrett Wilson.
Yeah.
He's getting the targets. Adams will play, but probably will be limited.
Yeah, I start Adams because, again, you've been waiting. I mean, he's been sitting there with a hamstring. It magically healed. If we talked and heard about it, so it magically healed. He's been well rested. He's ready to go. I think go ahead and play Adams because we've been waiting. We need somebody. I've been just watching Adams on my bench, plugging in different guys. Like I'm like, finally, he's here. So I think if you have Adams, you have to play him this week, and he could get, as Michelle said, limited snaps, but it still could be very effective. Where he knows Aaron Rodgers, so it's not like a learning curve is there. He could still end up with 2 touchdowns, even if he gets like 30 snaps, right? And he can still score twice. So I think Adams is going to have a magically good game here. Immediately, all of a sudden, no effects of any hamstring injury with Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I think the hamstring's just fine. We have a lot more wide receiver rankings to get into. Our wide receiver 2s that we like this week, the guys we differ on. We're going to rank some good flex plays, and then, of course, get into our tight ends. But we'll do all of that after we take a quick break.
All right, this episode Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by Arena Club. For most of us that like to collect cards, the idea of spending $2,000 or more on a special card, whether it's a Mahomes rookie card or another exciting card we have in our baseball collection, just isn't in the cards. I love collecting, but that's some serious money to drop. Thanks to slab packs from arenaclub.com, now it's possible to score gem mints for a fraction of the retail price. Every card that I listed there that you look at, Mahomes rookie, you look at Luka Doncic, Ellie De La Cruz, these are cards that were listed from last week's Arena Club slab pack drop. Arena Club is the only repack that provides real value, a complete view of all possible cards, and clear hit rates for each one. Arena Club slab packs are revolutionizing the repack game with transparency. The Arena Club grading process is accurate, fast, and transparent with a full grade rationale provided and an explanation of how your card was scored. Whether you're buying, selling, trading, or displaying, Arena Club is the card collecting platform you have to check out. Right now, you can get 10% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/lockedonnfl and use the code LOCKEDONNFL. That's arenaclub.com/lockedonnfl, code LOCKEDONNFL, all lowercase, for 10% off your first purchase.
This episode is also brought to you by the Game Time app. Buying tickets to your favorite event shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. I've used this app 1 gazillion times, and it's because it's so easy to use, and they just give you everything you want, right? You get a panorama view of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. You know exactly what your view is going to be throughout the entire event. You get to buy tickets in a matter of seconds. I'm super impatient, so that's important for me. 2 taps and you're set. And then they have the best ticket coverage in the business in case anything goes wrong. They have event cancellation protection, 24-hour return guarantee, and job loss assurance. Take the guessing work out of buying tickets with Game Time. All you have to do is download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. T. Higgins did not start off well for him to start the season with the injuries. He didn't play for quite a while. But the last couple weeks, now that he's back in the full swing of things, he's been a really decent play, right? And he's getting the targets over the last 3 weeks, 10 targets, 14-7, at least 60 yards in all 3 of the last 3 games, and then 83 and 77 yards the last 2 games. Like, he's been a go-to weapon for Joe Burrow. I think moving forward, he's just in your lineup every week.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's maybe wrapping his head around that he's stuck with the Bengals for this year, and that's probably okay. Like, he can still be a big part in what they do here. If they can beat the Browns and Get the Eagles at home the next week. All of a sudden, they're 500 and maybe back in this AFC mix, where there's probably a couple openings now for the wild card. So that's important, because that probably means T. Higgins won't be traded. I don't see that happening anyway at this point, because, again, the Bengals want to be competitive this year and want to get one more year out of Higgins. So I think that means he's got to buy into what they're doing and play with Jamar Chase, who's also looking for that contract. The best way to get that contract is be on the field and produce, and that's what you're seeing now with T. Higgins. I think he's a little bit motivated to do that, because if the Bengals don't give him that deal, another team certainly will, and make him one of the highest paid wide receivers in the game. So just go out there, produce week in and week out. Again, we've said his availability is huge for Joe Burrow, because when he has Chase and Higgins, Joe Burrow, and when he's healthy, it's unstoppable here. So that's also a big thing. He has to be an integral part of what they do with Jamar Chase.
Yeah, I think the Bengals need to figure out a way to pay both Chase and Higgins next year,
They'll
because
try.
they're both huge to this team. They do different things. They're so important to Joe Burrow. Now, Amari Cooper just got traded to the Bills. We don't even know if he's going to play yet, right?
Yeah.
But if he does play, can you start him in your lineup? It's against the Titans, not an easy matchup at all. The Titans actually haven't allowed a wide receiver to even hit 70 receiving yards this season, only allowed 2 receiving touchdowns to wide receivers. Tough matchup. And then he would be brand new. So how many snaps will he play? You have him ranked at wide receiver 29. At the moment, I have him at 24. I'm bringing him down. I don't feel good about that. But it's going to be hard to trust him in your lineup this week.
Yeah, let's just check all the reports on that. At least it's a Sunday game, so you'll have a good idea then with the Titans what's going to go on in that game, and just keep tabs on all those Buffalo local reports. There'll be a lot of that. So just say, okay, if he's got a limited snap count and this matchup is tough, you might lean away from him. But if you think he's going to get significant touches here to help this offense right away, I think it kind of eases the burden that A, they just came off a good win against the Jets. B, they're playing the Titans, who they should be able to beat with just like the running game and defense. But another factor could be, is James Cook available? Do we need some more weapons in here? Are we happy with Ray Davis, our young receivers and tight end? How eager are we to get him in the lineup and help Josh Allen? So a lot of factors are coming into play. But regardless, the matchup is tough enough where I say at the best, he's a wide receiver 3 for you this week. So you can probably find an option that you can trust a little bit more with the snaps and the matchup this week.
I have Brian Thomas Jr. and Jameson Williams as low-end wide receiver 2s at wide receiver 20 and 21. You have them more in your flex range at wide receiver 26 and 28. The Brian Thomas Jr. matchup isn't as juicy as the Jameson Williams one is. The Vikings are allowing a ton of receiving yards to wide receivers and fantasy points, second most in both yards and points to the wide receiver position this year. So I really like Jameson Williams. I know like the targets aren't like super high, but he just keeps coming down with that big touchdown or that big play. So I'm going to keep starting him. Brian Thomas Jr., a little bit more risky, but I'm fine with it in this matchup. We're not too different on the rankings, so I don't want to like say we are, but is there any concern for you about these two?
The only concern is they're a little bit big play dependent. So if that big play doesn't come to kind of pad their stats, then their stats are not so good, right? And those are really hard receivers to rank. I'll just be honest. Like, I don't know, because it could be that one play changes the whole game. If they hit on it with their quarterback, or Goff or Lawrence looks for them in that situation, then it changes their whole day, right? I mean, if they miss that shot and it's like a 50-yard touchdown goes off the board, it can end up like 3 for 55 or something, which is still not terrible, right? If you're looking at wide receiver 3. So that's what makes it hard with these guys. But I think I'm with you. I trust Williams because he's been doing it every week, where Thomas is a little up and down. He is a rookie, and there are some more weapons in there. Evan Ingram's return definitely changes things a little bit as well for Thomas.
So another guy that's very big play dependent, it's George Pickens, right?
Yeah.
Now he gets a new quarterback and Russell Wilson, a really hard matchup though. So there's a lot of things against it. Like maybe Russell Wilson can help George Pickens definitely like in the future, make him better for fantasy. In this game though, with Russell playing his very first start of the season, a very first start in this offense system, I'm worried about George Pickens, right? So let me give you this question. Would you rather go with Juju Smith-Schuster after what he did prior to the Chiefs bye against the 49ers, or go with George Pickens this week?
That's a really tough call, Michelle. Like, and you had to bring up an ex-Steeler, the current Steeler as well, of course. So Man, let me look at my rankings here real quick. I actually have Pickens a little bit ahead of Juju Smith-Schuster. I'll say if you're looking for ceiling, I'll do my old thing. If you're looking for ceiling, Pickens is it, right? Wilson could unlock him for a big play playing off the running game because that's what they're going to do. They're going to come out trying to run on the Jets, which you can do. We saw that last week with the Bills, even with Ray Davis in there. So again, they're going to try to run and set up the big playoff play action. If they hit that big play, again, just like these other young receivers, and that connection was off of Justin Fields, by the way, this is probably why they're making that change, then you have a shot there. But if you're looking for, I don't know, like 8 catches or 6 to 8 catches for like 73 yards or something that I know is a floor, you'll get that from Juju Smith-Schuster. But I would not be surprised if George Pickens goes like 2 for 20 or if he goes like 4 for 101, right? Either one could happen, and I would not be surprised. So, but a little bit more volatility. If you want to play it safer, if you're in a PPR leaning league, I think I go Juju.
Yeah, I have Juju comfortably ranked ahead. I'm at 28, George Pickens at 35. I guess it's yet to see, right, if they're going to use Juju in this role every single week. Mahomes did say after the game they're going to be changing it up every week, but to who, right? Like, it's not really like maybe Xavier Worthy will get more involved, but I think for now it's Juju Smith-Schuster. 49ers defense is not good at the moment, allowing the third most yards per reception to wide receivers. Plus, they've always struggled against the slot. Juju's heavy slot guy, so I like Juju this week. 2 other guys we like with high upside: Demario Douglas against the Jaguars, because the Jaguars are terrible in allowing the most fantasy points per game to wide receivers this season. And Demario Douglas had a career high 92 yards in his first game with Drake May, plus scored his first receiving touchdown of his career in the first game with May. And then Christian Watson against the Texans, especially if Jaden Reed misses, he has that big playability.
Yeah, I think I'm going to Demario Douglas first. I mean, the Jaguars matchup is just so good. Like every receiver seems to produce against them, and you figure you're going to have some volume in this game. Again, the Jaguars are nearly 6-point favorites in London for this matchup, so you think for a change, the Jaguars will be playing from ahead. The Patriots are always seemingly playing from behind. So I like Douglas. Again, volume play. I was encouraged that he scored a touchdown last week. That was one thing kind of missing from his repertoire when he was getting going as a rookie last year. So that's good that he's an option there. Then I would go with Watson. Jane Reed and Watson are both banged up going in this game. Watson's always listed on the injury report, it seems like. But I think they want to unlock Watson a little bit more. You can beat the Texans secondary with some long plays. We saw that last week with Kayshon Boutte and the Patriots against that very same team. So when you look at that, there's a little bit of big play potential there with Watson. I'm going Josh Downs. I have to drop him, Michelle. I hate to say Joe Flacco looks like he's not going to be out there. Looks like they're intent getting Anthony Richardson out, and I never thought I'd be so down, like so disappointed that Joe Flacco was not starting over Anthony Richardson. But Joe Flacco throws it up. He sees the matchups, he puts it up. Anthony Richardson can call his own number. I'm not sure about the Jonathan Taylor availability. Too many variables for the Colts, while there's a less for those other two teams.
Yeah, I'm okay with Josh Downs. I'm very, very low on Michael Pittman Jr. this week. I have Pittman Jr. all the way down at 42. Josh Downs will still get the targets. It's a tough matchup against the Dolphins just because you can run so much against them. I'm actually higher on Downs if Jonathan Taylor has to miss. If Jonathan Taylor's there, then I'm going to move Downs as well. But if they're going to have to throw without Taylor, then I'm fine with playing Josh Downs as like a flex play type of guy. We have to get into our tight ends now. I mean, there's a handful of guys we feel really good about, and then a handful of guys that maybe will get you 5 to 8 points. But we're going to talk about all those and the guys with the good and bad matchups here to close out today's show.
This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It is America's #1 sportsbook, and we have a game. I know it's not the most exciting game. I think the point total is under 40 still for this one. Check it. I don't think it's going to go up very much here. If it's the Saints hosting the Broncos, definitely low scoring, definitely not a fantasy bonanza, but it is always an opportunity to get in the action on FanDuel there. And I do like the Broncos coming in with Sean Payton to figure it out and beat Dennis Allen, his former defensive coordinator, and the Saints. So Sean Payton, a lot of ballyhoo's going to be there. It is Drew Brees night there, so it could help the Saints, but I do like the Broncos. I think Sean Payton is going to take care of business there. You can put your own bet and look at the total there for yourself, updated later in the game. And you can only get that fine action on FanDuel. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bet. So you can track TNF all night long if you get there with the Broncos and Saints. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. When you place your first $5 bet, that's only at FanDuel.com. Check it out for the latest odds there. And enjoy the big returns here for the next half of the season. Visit FanDuel.com again and check out America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Michelle, time to close the show looking at our tight end rankings and close our look at our rankings in general before we get into our sleepers and DFS picks there for FanDuel and Price Picks on Friday's show. We do have the same 6 tight ends at the top. I mean, Brock Bowers is in a great matchup against the Rams. I am at 2, you am at 1. Then George Kittle, Trey McBride, we have them flipped 1-3. Then looking at Travis Kelce, you have them at 4, I'm at 6. And then in between, I have them flipped as well, Sam Laporta and Evan Ingram. But however we look at it, those are the same top 6. And the guys that you can probably trust most in position, I will extend a little bit to Kyle Pitts because that 0 has been erased by 2 very solid games in a row. The tight end landscape is not great. So 6.5 to 7 tight ends you can trust. Everyone else, it gets a little tougher. So who do you have, first of all, Michelle, at tight end 7, where I have Pitts?
Yeah, I mean, I do have Pitts at 8. I think he's a fine play. He's a good play against the Seahawks defense, but I'm going with Mark Andrews at 7.
Okay.
And I think he's finally starting to get utilized a little bit more. It's been a very, very slow process, but it's starting to get going. He finally scored his first touchdown last week, scored a season high or put up a season high 66 receiving yards as well, getting those deeper targets. And then also with him, he's finally getting red zone targets as well. He got 4 red zone targets over the last 2 weeks. He had 0 from weeks 1 through 4. So they're starting to utilize him where he should be. Like, and maybe the accident that he had before the season was worse than they showed us. Maybe that's what's taking so long. But I do think slowly we'll start to see the true Mark Andrews. And I expect this Ravens-Buccaneers game to be super high scoring. I mean, both of these teams are allowing the first and second most fantasy points to the quarterback position. So we both expect Lamar Jackson and Baker Mayfield to put up numbers, right? That means they got to be passing to some people and throwing touchdowns. So I think Mark Andrews can come down with a touchdown, have at least 60 yards in this game. So that's why I have Andrews at tight end 7 this week.
Yeah, for some reason, I'm not totally sold that he's totally back, and I could be wrong on this, but the Bucs are actually decent in a way because of their safeties against tight ends. So the corner is a little bit more vulnerable, and I feel like someone like Rashad Bateman or someone is going to disappoint us and have a nice game with Zay Flowers, and it's going to cut into the tight end workload. And it's very hard between him and Isaiah Likely, right? I mean, we thought Likely had burst on the scene, and we weren't sure. Then that one game with Kolar making plays, like I'm a little bit nervous with Mark Andrews, right? You might be a little touchdown, big play dependent. I think all tight ends are like that this year for the most part, except those guys we reeled off in the top 6.5/7. So when we look at it overall, yeah, I can't completely trust him. Again, I am at 15, but again, 15 could be 8, it could be 12. I think all these guys are so tight, it's just hard to know. Like, it's just trying to put these in order some way, somehow. And again, if he's your guy, like a Dalton Kincaid, you just might have to roll with him and just hope for the best. I mean, there's not a lot that you're going to say, oh, I'm going to go get David Njoku, or I'm going to get Pat Frymouth and say, okay, I'm good. I've upgraded my position. You probably have not, because it's not a sure thing those guys are going to do anything either. So stick with guys like Andrews and Kincaid. The numbers should come.
Yeah, I'm really low on Kincaid this week.
But
matchup. And then your boy Otten, you can't get over him, right? Those 2 receptions for 15 yards got you all hot and bothered last week. You have him at tight on 8 in the same matchup that we're talking about with Mark Andrews. I get it, right? Like I was just talking about that Mark Andrews could score a touchdown because it should be high scoring. Maybe Otten gets into the end zone like he did last week to save his fantasy day. That's really what you're hoping for because the receiving yards just aren't there with Otten.
Yeah, that was my prediction. He was going to score. He did. He was overdue for a touchdown. He scored. So we gave you that. I didn't say he was going to do much else, but I did say he was going to find the end zone. If you find the end zone and you have 6 points as a tight end, that's good. You're good this season. That's a big thing. Just find the end zone, fall backwards in there, and score. He actually made a nice catch on that play. But yeah, K. Dotton again, wide range of outcomes, fantasy buzz phrase. He could be 8. He could be 17. It would not surprise me.
Is it a wide range of outcomes? Because these are his last 4 games: 6 points, 8 points, 6 points, 8 points.
Okay,
It seems
maybe
like
that's
he's going to score between 6 to 8,
yeah.
which honestly could put him at
Yeah,
tight end
that's what
10,
I'm saying.
a little bit lower.
But it really depends on what these other guys do. What if there's like a lot of people falling flat, right? He could have 8 points, and you're right, it could be 8th at tight end at this rate, the way it's going. So we don't know. But I think K. Dot, at least he's being involved. He had some good targets before last week, and getting the end zone kind of saved his day. The thing that happened last week is Chris Godwin went nuts. The running game went nuts. So the fact that he was able to even get a target and score was somewhat interesting. So again, the matchup is not bad against the Ravens. So he has some opportunity. The Ravens have given up some games to tight end. So again, a lot of it is matchup based. Now I'm looking at it, hoping for the best.
That's fair. That's fair. Now, Tucker Kraft, after 2 great weeks from weeks 4 and 5, came crumbling back down in week 6. I just think they didn't need him, right?
Yeah.
They're beating up on the Cardinals with these big plays from their wide receivers. It just wasn't needed for Tucker Kraft to be used. I do think in this game against the Texans, he will need to be utilized. It should be a closer game. He still was on the field 82% of snaps last week. He's like, this is just what you're going to get from any tight end. It's going to be up and down, up and down. But I think Tucker Kraft, as good as anyone, has a chance to score, has a chance to have a big game. So I'm still very much, if I have him on my roster, I'm still very down to play him. I have him at tight end 9. You're a little bit lower at tight end 16, though.
Yeah, I actually don't like the matchup. I was talking about the Cardinals being sneaky good against a tight end. That I think their recent history would say the opposite, but they've been actually good against the tight end. The Texans also have been better against the tight end than they have been on receivers, especially downfield. Last week we did have a good game for the Patriots. Hunter Henry, he was pretty good, but it was still more about the big play to Boutte and you had Douglas as well go off in that game a little bit more. So the Packers just spread it around so much, like 1 or 2 guys could take over and 1 or 2 guys could disappear. So just have to be prepared. It could happen with Watson. It could happen with Dubs. They either have a big game or do nothing. And Jaden Reed is like the tie that binds everything together. So just be prepared. And again, another guy that could be way down or way high this week. It just really depends if he can get in the end zone and get that big play early.
3 tight ends we agree on this week. It's Hunter Henry against the Jaguars, Zach Ertz against the Panthers, and David Njoku against the Eagles. No, that was last week against the Bengals. We have them around the same range, anywhere from tight end 10 to tight end 13. But if you had to rank those guys in order of like the ceiling for them, how would you do that between Henry and Njoku and Zach Ertz?
I think Henry does have a high ceiling because he can score in the red zone. I think if you go next for ceiling, I think you go David Njoku because you score. If you're looking for just that happy medium in between, Ertz probably get decent volume. The Panthers cannot cover the tight end at all anymore. So keep that in the back of your head. Now, I go Henry, Ertz, Njoku. These are 9, 10, 11 for me in that order. So, again, the fact that these 3 guys, and I feel somewhat okay about it in the top 12, all of a sudden kind of tells you a lot about the landscape. But again, matchups could mean everything here in playing the right tight end if you're playing the streaming game.
Yeah, I'm going to go Njoku, especially now that Amari Cooper is gone. Njoku led the team last week with 7 targets, 5 receptions. Only turned into 31 yards.
Yeah,
but I do think if he gets 7 targets against this Bengals defense, it's going to turn into more. There's about 9 targets per game, like just being left from Amari Cooper. And I don't think those just go over to someone else with Jerry Jeudy getting that much more, or Elijah Moore. Like, I think David Njoku is going to be the focal point of this offense. So I'm going to play him as a high upside guy. Hunter Henry can definitely come down with a touchdown in that Jaguars game. Zach Ertz is the safest to score you about 7 points because he's going to get 5 receptions for probably 40 yards, but not come down with a touchdown. But all of these guys are playable. It just comes down to you need the upside or the safety of getting 8 points for sure from Zach Ertz.
Yeah,
then
8
maybe
points.
You go that way.
Yeah.
Yes,
exactly. You celebrate if you get 8 points from your tight end. I'm just going to say that.
Absolutely. All right. That is it for today's episode. Thank you to you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Every day, we'll be back tomorrow to finish up our week 7 rankings and prep. We're going to get into our sleepers of the week and our favorite DFS plays of the week. So don't miss it. Bye, y'all.